other internationally respected forensic psychiatrists. Each verified the preliminary results. In a last-ditch effort to prove everyone, including myself, wrong, I tracked down Dr. P.D., a forensic psychiatrist who's performed assessments on Jeffrey Dahmer, the Unabomber, just to name a few. Dr. D is the one who finally ended my search because Dr. D is the one who told me he was not going to charge me, even though he had looked at everything I sent him. He told me to stop wasting my money on doctors, tests, and lawyers, because I had wasted my money on really good ones and they all agreed. While too young to formally diagnose, Paris has all the characteristics needed to be another Ted Bundy. He gave me the contact info for a risk management firm in California that can help me change my identity and advised me to do so because, in his opinion, I would not be safe if Paris were released anytime soon. Before Paris killed Ella, I thought firms like that only existed in movies. Now I know they exist in nightmares. I keep the number in my contact list and check every so often to make sure they're still in business. What happened from the time of Dr. F's testing until today is laid out in Paris's file. It's much of the same, out of him and out of me. Only my contact with him grew less frequent until I finally had to stop it altogether in September of 2011, after reading what I refer to as my son's first mini-manifesto, written to his caseworkers at the time. He wrote it in May 2010. He never knew I would read it. After I read it, I was convinced. Paris is a killer now. What he wrote was nothing new, just more detailed. What he wrote made me vomit. What he wrote was the straw that broke my camel's back. Of course, he still blamed me for everything. That isn't what made me vomit. I'm used to that. Quote, "She is only a detriment to my treatment. She attempts to sabotage any fundamental rights I possess, tries to deny me any sort of comfort or solace, and acts viciously towards me and my family." Unquote. Most everyone in this courtroom can attest to the fact that never was and never will be true. I've done and will continue to do just the opposite. Fight to get him treatment, make sure his rights are not violated, keep him as safe as I can with the means I've developed through the creation of the Ella Foundation. Paris is the only family I have. I've never acted viciously towards my son, even though most would understand if I ever do. I've never acted viciously towards the other so-called family I did have. Did I yell at them? You bet. Did I cuss them out? More than once. Did I take photos of my dead child from them after they sued me? You betcha. Is any of that vicious, especially compared to Paris's actions or compared to past actions of my so-called family, which are easily labeled vicious? No, not at all. Those were the acts of a mother and daughter drowning in grief, anger, despair, and disappointment, and finding no comfort from her own family. Those acts were not vicious. Every now and again in his manifesto, Paris slips and tells the truth. But even that wasn't the straw that broke my camel's back, made me walk away from my son for what I hoped was the final time. Obviously, I hope I cannot live with. Quote, "I believe that approximately a month or so prior to my offense that I singled out my sister as a means of exacting revenge on my mother, of breaking her down, using her as a weapon against my mother. I wanted Ella's murder by my hands to break my mother into pieces. I wanted to lash out and viciously hurt someone, to relieve the storm inside of me. I also chose Ella that night because I knew she was weak and that if I decided to go through with my plan, she could not offer enough resistance to stop me." Unquote. What finally convinced me, finally made me stop worrying about what everyone thought of me when I say my son is a psychopath, sadist, and narcissist, finally made me do what I never thought I could do, walk away from my child, were these words written by my son. Quote, "I'm trying to help you understand. I had actually planned to strangle Ella. I carried the knife in there to be available if I needed to resort to it. When I was choking her, however, it seemed to be taking too long. I could not bear the look in her eyes, which, despite how dark the room was, I felt boring into me. It was the most awful thing in the world. That's why I panicked and started to stab her. It was so awful for her, so sick, so heinous. I kept stabbing because I was horribly angry and also because I panicked and freaked out." Unquote. But this is where my camel's back broke and the bile I'd held back for 5 years finally came out. Quote, "The sickest part is that when it occurred to me that I could still walk away and call an ambulance after the first stab or two, I pushed the thought away. My self-righteous convictions, obsession with death, and blatant disregard for others allowed me to kill my sister." Unquote. Ella could have been saved. Paris could have stopped. But he thought about it and chose not to save her, chose not to stop, chose to torture her, chose to terrorize her, chose to kill her, then chose not to kill me so I'd suffer until the day I die, and has not lost sleep about it since. That blew the final fuse left in my rational head. That was the new thing I never knew before that finally convinced me my son is a sociopath. My son knew Ella could have been saved and he decided she wasn't worth it and still doesn't care that he made that choice. As his mom, no matter how much I love him, I had to walk away, to focus on not losing what little grasp of sanity I had left after reading those words, to focus on keeping the promise I made to Ella the night she died, to make her death a meaningful one, to focus on not hurting him, and to prepare myself for today. I've done all the above since I walked away from my son in September 2011. Barely. You have no idea what miracles it has taken to ensure I can sit here today, sane, rational, full of love for my child, to say these things about him. I've seen my son 4 times since we both arrived in Abilene. I thought, until these last 2 days of court, we've reached a truce of sorts, which makes everything I've just said about him that much more painful to say. Which makes it that more painful to say I see no change in him, other than he is coming more fully into his personality disorder. To survive prison, no doubt, he has to be predator or prey. Does he look like prey to you? I only have a couple more things to say, Your Honor, then I'm done, at least in this venue. I have a life to live, a foundation to run, and a child to keep as safe as I can if he'll let me. Out of all the people in his life, I still believe I'm the only one who loves him enough to do what's right for him, and do what's right by him for the public. The last things I have to say to Paris. Paris, please look at me. If you can't look at me, I know you have been listening and committing to that voracious memory of yours everything I've said. So make sure you commit this too to play over in your mind, deciding what to make of this moment between us. I love you, Paris. I love you all the time as fiercely as you hate me from time to time. You can't make me stop any more than I can make you stop. From this point out, you're going to live your life and I'm going to live mine. I know you'll do what it takes to survive the world you've chosen to live in. I accept you exactly as you are and love you no matter what. I know I can't have your love. You don't have it to give. But I've survived the worst you can dish out, to me anyway. I've matched you wit for wit and outwitted you more than you care to admit. Called you out when you needed to be called out, loved you when you needed to be loved, and passed every test you've made me endure to prove something to the tentacles that are part of you. You yourself have admitted I'm the only person you consider a worthy opponent. One thing you may not be old enough or experienced enough yet to know, Paris, is that sometimes you have to lay down your arms and ask your opponent for help, if only to fight another battle, another day with her. I hope your voracious memory remembers that the day someone tries to hurt you for being who you are, the beloved son of Charity Lee. The day someone hurts you, Paris, is the day they make an enemy out of me. I don't fight like you do, but if anything happens to you other than the loss of your freedom, I'll go after them with all I've got. After surviving what you did to Ella and loving the man you've become, I have a lot of go after in me. All you have to do is ask for my help if you need it. I tell the truth when I say I understand you. You know I do. It's my belief that one of the reasons we still get along so well when we're able to set aside our animosities for a brief moment is because everyone, even you, wants someone who loves them enough to try to understand them, no matter what. I promise you, kiddo, you'll always have that person in me. I will always love you. I will always try to understand you. I know who you are. I know what you're capable of. I know how you think. I've always loved you anyway. And hear this part well, Paris. Take it to heart. You miscalculated the night you chose to murder Ella. You underestimated me. Never underestimate me again, Paris. Never underestimate my love for you. Never underestimate my ability to figure you out. Never underestimate my ability to help you. Never underestimate my ability to stop you. Never underestimate my ability to survive you. You will never destroy me. You will never break me down or shatter me into a million little pieces. Never look at me again and think you have any power over me other than what I give you out of love. You are not the one in control here. Love is. And never forget, I love you to the stars and back, just like always, no matter what. Your Honor, should you decide to send my child to prison today, I beg you to please grant me 15 minutes with my son unrestrained before he's sent to the closest thing to hell on earth I've ever visited. He is not going to hurt me, not today. Over the last 5 years, I've had a lot of time to think about what Paris did to Ella that night. I know as much or more about that night than anybody in this room other than Paris. Based on that knowledge, I estimate, I hope, it took about 15 minutes for Paris to murder his sister, for Ella to breathe her last breath, for me to lose the life I so desperately wanted with my kids. I never had the chance to say goodbye to Ella in those 15 minutes. We both know if Paris decides to keep me in his life, the state of Texas won't let me touch my son, at least not for a long time. I'd like the chance to sit a minute with the last child I have left, give him a hug, tell him I love him in private and have a moment of peace with him, to hold the hand I've held the last 18 years when I could. Of course, only if you both agree. For all I know, Paris may not want to be in the same room with me ever again after this. Somehow I doubt that, though. Whatever the decision on that is, I respectfully ask Your Honor to rule according to Texas Penal Code, as you are obligated to do based on the evidence before you concerning my son's future. I will continue to do my best to keep my promises to both my children, no matter what you rule. Thank you for the opportunity to address the court.